All right, so our first presenter today is a fifth-generation railroader who has worked on crews across the United States. Brice Douglas is a boomer, not a generational boomer, but a railroad boomer who follows the job and the mystique of the rails from state to state. And more than just a train, Brice will take us on a journey through some of his mainstay operations. We'll first start as north as you can go in America on the Alaska Railroad. Brice is a conductor here, and when he's not working, he rides along to make breathtaking photos of the landscape and the people who make the railroad run. Each photograph you'll see in today's presentation has been made during non-work hours and approved by the Alaska Railroad for this presentation. Through his personal connections, Brice gives us the train man's point of view, and an understanding of this family operation and how it runs from top to bottom. We'll then travel a little further south to trace the remains of the Milwaukee Road Lines West across the railroad's abandoned northern corridor. As a boomer, Brice has the flexibility to take extended photography trips, and this project has been several years in the making. The pictures you'll see in this portion of the presentation speak to the Goliath the Milwaukee Road once was, and the impact its presence and the infrastructure continue to impart on the landscape. And finally, he'll conclude with a mixed series of photos from his travels and his railroad career that he's made along with his faithful companion and beloved dog, Miss Montana Red. Brice, why don't you come on up?
Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Haley. All right, I'm going to present to you my presentation. It's more than just a train, and here we go. All right, my name is Brice Douglas. As Haley mentioned, my presentation is called More Than Just a Train. I'm honored to present next to these other talented presenters. Thank you for joining us. The name of my presentation came from the way I see the world through a set of trainman's eyes. Having grown up in the Midwest, I have a deep love for the more open spaces and off-grid towns of the American West. I grew up with the memories of traveling the West with my grandparents on U.S. rail routes, oftentimes to see the railroads. Photographically, I'm fascinated by the people, machines, and structures that make the railroads run. I'm drawn to the places that the railways built. Where the tracks are long gone, I love to imagine the story of the people, if there were any, in my photographs, and the characters about to enter or who have just exited the stage. As a good friend of mine and former boss, Mo King, said, "You live a very storied life." Here's a small snippet of that story. I present to you More Than Just a Train. These are Alaska Railroad suit buttons. I've wanted this image for quite a long time. When I started working for the Alaska Railroad a couple of years ago, when I was handed a packet of buttons once I graduated from the conductor's course, I always wanted to lay all the buttons out and take a photo like this, and I finally was able to do that this past year. All right, this is the beginning of the Alaska Railroad's portion of the presentation. This is the Alaska Railroad main line looking north at Grandview, Alaska. The Alaska Railroad will be celebrating its centennial in 2023. The Alaska Railroad is one of the most diverse full-service railroads in North America, providing both freight and passenger services to the people of Alaska. The railroad runs many types of trains. On the passenger side, they offer their own passenger services, and they also offer charter passenger service for the cruise ship lines. On the freight side, they run mixed freight, 2 gravel trains, coal trains, military moves, container traffic, and special freights. On a busy day, there can be over 10 passenger trains and about as many freight trains running on a single track railroad. To keep all those trains running on 470 miles of main line, it requires a lot of planning, coordination, cooperation, and working as a team between departments. Over the course of the last couple months, I did ride-alongs with train crews, visited stations, shops, and yards to showcase the behind-the-scenes look at the railroad. I personally think that it is the resiliency, dedication, and passion of the employees that will keep this railroad moving. I would like to extend a special thank you to the management at the railroad for your support and dedication to this project. I hope you enjoy this presentation. This is probably one of my favorite images that I've created. It was definitely in the top 3. On the right, you see locomotive engineer Chris Cedarberg. He checks the time while the train is stopped for some glacier viewing. This is on the south side of Grandview. That glacier you see in the center is Trail. It's called Trail Glacier. I've noticed the Alaska Railroad is old school in a way where they have a way with time. It's very important up there to keep everything coordinated with the amount of train movements we have. When crews go on duty, they get a time check from the dispatcher, and we check the hours, minutes, and seconds of every clock on the crew. Here we have locomotive engineer Chris Floyd up in the cab there in 3011. And you have conductor Maria Rodriguez. They're both discussing the moves to be made on a fall night at the Anchorage Locomotive Shop. They're working as hostlers, and you can kind of see it right below the 3011. What's kind of unique about the Alaska Railroad is almost all of the locomotives still have builder plates on them. Here we have a father and son journeyman mechanics, Brian and Tim Turgoose, inside of the DMU at the Anchorage shops. The Alaska Railroad has several generational families working for the railroad. This night they were working on the comm system for the public address system. That's why you see the hole in the ceiling there. They had about 4 or 5 guys working on it, troubleshooting the issues. This is a familiar face to some. This is Alaska Railroad Chief Crew Dispatcher, Frank Keller. He's giving the crew turnstile a spin. The turnstile is used to show the call sheets for each upcoming day on the railroad. The Alaska Railroad has over 120 train and engine employees on the roster each summer. Frank is really well known for his drone shots of the Alaska and, of course, the scenes on the Denver, Rio Grande, and Western. Here we have Alaska Railroad 4319. It's the Operation Lifesaver locomotive. This was down at Seward, Alaska during a sunrise there. Seward, Alaska is the beginning of the Alaska Railroad, located at approximately milepost 2. I really like this shot, and I'm a big believer in raw human, and it's more of the behind the scenes kind of aspects that really showcase the people. And this was a kind of a funny story behind this. I was riding the Glacier Discovery train up and over Grandview with this crew, and this is locomotive engineer Louie Carey, and her words to me were, "Let me get ready," as she applies the lipstick in the mirror. The diversity we have at the Alaska Railroad is really quite impressive when compared to other railroads. I believe about 15% of our train and engineman ranks are females. Here we have conductor Vern Gillis. He's making his way to the head end through the bag car. Here's another shot of Frank. He's fielding phone calls between the superintendent and train crews, making sure all of our trains will be fully staffed. He is definitely well known. If you've been around the block a couple times, you've probably seen his work somewhere or another. Here again, we have conductor Maria Rodriguez in the process of her hostler duties. She's just filled up that Jeep, and she's returning the fuel nozzle to the fuel stand there. Hostler duties on the Alaska Railroad include many tasks such as fueling, sanding, cleaning locomotive cabs, washing locomotives, braking and making up of engine consists, plus the occasional coach switch or dog catch. Here we have a station agent at Talkeetna. He's loading the baggage for the Hurricane Turn. The Hurricane Turn is a train that provides one of the last flag stop services in North America. That means you can be dropped off and picked up anywhere in the wilderness 5 days a week between Hurricane and Talkeetna. This may be a familiar face to some folks that have watched the Alaska Railroad TV series. This is locomotive engineer Bill Bivens. He's in charge of the P-31 car on the Hurricane Turn. The P-car series are ex-Amtrak F-40s used as cab cars and for head-end power. The prime movers are removed in them, but they still have the generators for HEP to power the lighting and air conditioning on the train set. Here's some kind of impromptu photos at the Anchorage shops. You have a journeyman on the left and a carman on the right. It was just kind of neat walking through, and you get a lot of friendly faces in there, which is it's always a nice sigh of relief from a photographer's point of view. So inside the Alaska Railroad shops, the trains come in after the end of the day. They get put away. A lot of times they stay together unless there's coach switching involved. But once they get spotted, during the night shift, the mechanical staff take over and they do a thorough inspection of every train that comes in. Each train gets the process involved with getting inspected. They do a walkthrough from the head end to rear. In the process, each aspect of the coach is checked, including doors, windows, seats, toilets, truck frames, wheels, air brake systems, etc. Here, a mechanical crew member is checking the sliding door on a bag car. We have an EMD SD70 Mac at the Anchorage diesel shop on the fuel rack. We call this track the inside rack because it's closest to the building, and on the left side is the outside rack. The two high doors that you see on the left side of the screen, that's part of the back shop. They do a lot of heavy work there, like traction motor change outs and things like that. This is down in Seward, Alaska. That's conductor Tyler Standridge. He's changing ends. He was called for a Seward freight. A couple times a year, the Alaska Railroad sends a set of power down to Seward, and usually a ship will come in. The freight will be staged onto, depends, could be containers, could be flats. This time it was a sand train, and we'll get a little more into that later on here. But Tyler Standridge is changing ends here between the two Macs. Here we have Supervisor John Simmons. John Simmons is in charge of most of the passenger operations. I think we're pretty lucky at the railroad. We get a lot of, there's a lot of swag that the railroad likes to give out. And I think partially because we have such a great passenger business, but I also think because most of our people are very passionate here. The Alaska Railroad actually has their own print shop. They do most of the forms, so your track warrant forms, delay reports, basically almost every timetable is printed in-house, which is kind of neat to see. You can see the posters on the wall, though. Those are the railroad does a poster every year that they like to give away, so it's kind of neat. This one on the left was a mosaic of many of the workers, and they turned their portraits into a mosaic, which was kind of neat. All right, this is the DMU at the Anchorage Depot. I'm sitting in a forklift here, kind of looking out, and I thought it was kind of a neat reflection on a pretty dreary, rainy day in Alaska. What's kind of neat about that DMU is it's self-propelled. It was made by Colorado Rail Car, I believe, in 2008. It was originally supposed to run by itself. It would run from Anchorage to Grandview, Alaska, kind of in the Chugach Mountain Range. You can see the name on the DMU is the Chugach Explorer. As ridership increased, essentially they decided to pair it with a couple more coaches, and they decided to add an engine on it. And basically it is now used as a cab car on that consist because of ridership increases. This is onboard supervisor Miranda. She's very talented behind the mic. Quite a few of us on the railroad in the operating ranks, we all collect pins. That's kind of our thing that we like to trade back and forth. And she happened to have a Operation Lifesaver logo pin with the state of Alaska that I was able to get off of her, which is probably one of my favorite pins in my collection. Here we have the Alaska Railroad. This is one of our single level cars, also made by Colorado Rail Car. It was fresh out of the wash bay down in Seward. This was part of the cruise ship consist that goes from a couple different rotations. Last summer, it would start in Seward, take passengers from the different cruise ships in Seward. It would go to the airport, then back to Seward. Other times it would run up to Talkeetna and drop passengers off there. Here we have the Alaska Railroad signage at the Seward Depot. The Coastal Classic, which is the premier Alaska Railroad train. It runs from Anchorage to Seward every day, 7 days a week during the summertime. Here it is arriving at Seward at the end of the line. You can kind of see there's a Mack and then a Jeep behind it. You got a bag car, and then you have two, they're bi-levels. They're basically, I think they're built by Colorado Rail Car as well. Those are our Gold Star cars. Those are our premium service. They come with two free drinks when you buy a ticket, meal service. It's very, very nice. They have open air platforms, so you can go look out and see the wildlife and everything from the best view on the train. It's a little behind the scenes here. This is Conductor Vern Gillis again on the Glacier Discovery. He's in the first floor of the DMU. He had just copied a track warrant, did all the job briefings associated with that, and now he has a few minutes of free time, so he's playing a harmonica for some of the passengers. We talked a little bit about the Seward freights that go down to Seward, Alaska. This is a back-to-back Max. They just pulled in the yard there. You can see they have about 20 flats behind them. And then to the right of that, you have a Bud RDC that's out of service. I believe it's going to be shipped somewhere at some point. And then you have to the very far right edge of the photo, you have some flats with some white bags on them. Those are super sacks. And I believe the railroad did about 8 pipe moves this last summer where they take a ship comes in, they unload, typically in this case, it was frac sand going up to the North Slope, and then loads of pipe. And this time the crew would pull into the yard, tie their flats down, run around the train, couple up to those loads, air test, and depart. So it's kind of neat. You get a little bit of everything out here, especially during the summertime. Here we have Tunnel 3 at milepost 52.3. This is just past the reach of the Alaska Central Railroad when they first started building. The Alaska Central Railroad started building the railroad northward from Seward in 1903, but they went bankrupt 4 years after building 50 miles of main line. On July 5th, 1923, the Gold Spike was driven on the north side of the Nenana River by President Warren G. Harding. So 2023, we're going to have a celebration, I believe, at the railroad. It's going to be our 100th anniversary, our centennial. I don't know the exact plans. The railroad's still in the process of coming up with those, but I think it's going to be a pretty big deal. One thing I really like about this section of track is there's 5 tunnels in a row. And what's really, really neat about this is it's in a canyon and there is no way to get back in here. There are no roads. I think it's 35-ish miles without a crossing in this area. It's all just mountains and wildlife. And pretty much every trip you see at least something, whether it's a bear, a moose. On this run, during the summer months, you could see beluga whales on Turn Again Arm. There's just so many different things you can see. And this is looking southbound. If you go a couple more miles down the track here, there's a set of horseshoe curves that climb about 3% grades to get up and over the mountain before slowly descending back down to Seward. Here we have a couple of baggage handlers at the Anchorage Depot, showing off the different tickets for the different places where the bags go. I think we do a pretty good job when it comes to lost bags because definitely have a better track record than the airlines. Something that was kind of stood out to me is out of all the passenger trains I worked last year, we only had one misplaced bag and they were able to locate it. Here we have the DMU in the back shop. This is a night that they were working on it, and they also wash the DMU a couple nights a week. Here you have onboard supervisor Mary Sprague. I think she has a pretty Alaskan story. She told me this, and I kind of rang a little bit with me. When she moved to Alaska, when she was offered the job, she sold everything she had. She moved to Talkeetna, and she lived in a tent until she purchased a cabin this year. Mary worked the hurricane turn to most of the 2022 summer season. I find that in Alaska, our people are pretty resilient. Obviously, you have the weather, can get down to -60, and you have railroaders out there moving the freight, especially on the north end in Fairbanks, where they 3 different locations rely on coal trains to keep the lights on. Here we have engineer Chris Cedarberg again. He just finished loading rafts on into this bag car on the Glacier Discovery. I've really grown to like black and white photos. I think that oftentimes color is really great, but black and white, you can just sit there and just kind of take it in and really, really enjoy it. The Alaska Railroad ships just about everything, including wet rafts and the rafters. This is the final image from the Alaska Railroad presentation here. I thought this was kind of neat. This was in the bag car as well. There's a couple neat stickers that kind of speak to me, I guess. You have Mount McKinley there in the center. It's now known as Denali. You have the Alaska Railroad UTU sticker there on the left side. It's United Transportation Union. That's what our T&E members are a part of. Below that, you have a Marine Corps sticker. And of course, last but not least, let there be trains. All right, now we're going to jump into the Milwaukee Road Lines West. This is something that I've been working on for quite a while. Can't wait to share this here. All right, so most of the former Milwaukee Main Line west of Miles City, Montana, was abandoned in March of 1980. Over 4 decades later, some traces remain. As a seasonal railroader, I took several months off in between assignments to explore what remained, oftentimes hiking, bicycling, driving, or exploring the right-of-way on horseback. This was the Milwaukee Road boxcar on a ranch near Harleton, Montana. You can see the old car tag there on the right-hand side for tracking cars. It's kind of neat. This is might be familiar to some. This is the bridge in Rosalia, Washington. It's a special concrete viaduct with, of course, the Milwaukee Road Herald still hanging on. Here we have Milwaukee Road Code Line in Miles City, Montana. The wires are still active here, used for crossing circuits in town. Transco operates the old Milwaukee Road shop facility. You can see there's a tiny white headlight down there. That was from the Transco switcher. They were coming out to get these string of coal cars together to bring them into the plant to send them through maintenance cycles. This is Michael Green. Michael Green is a Texas native. He's standing in front of substation number 9. This is just outside of Clinton, Montana. Michael works for BNSF as a conductor based in San Antonio. At the time, Michael was working out of Spokane, Washington, I believe under the old SP&S, his seniority district. He was also working in Havre, Montana. Me and him have done several trips together to explore the Milwaukee roads right away. Something that Michael is a pretty good friend of mine, and something that I thought was really, really neat. When I first hired on, I worked for Canadian Pacific Railway for 3 years, running pretty much everywhere between Chicago, Kansas City, and St. Paul, actually just outside of St. Paul towards Marquette, Iowa. But when I worked out of Davenport and Kansas City, my away from home terminal was Ottumwa, Iowa. Well, Michael Green's grandfather worked for the Milwaukee Road during World War II, and he has a photo of his grandfather on the caboose track in Ottumwa. Well, during my time there, I was able to pull out a date nail from the same caboose track that was used for wheel storage. It was the last date nail in the tie there, in all the ties on the track, and I was able to present that to him. So it was kind of a neat experience to be able to give him something that his grandfather had his photo taken right in front of during that time period. And the date, of course, matched up. I think it was like a 1928 tie with the square head on it. So it was pretty neat. All right, this is the Milwaukee Road Viaduct spanning over the town of Toccoa, Washington. The Milwaukee was the last railroad to build a main line through Montana, Idaho, and Washington, therefore usually had the least desired route leading to its demise. Of note, the Union Pacific had a roundhouse and rail yard where the horse arena in the center of the photo is located. Oftentimes, the Milwaukee would just build over the towns and not even go through them, just to be able to get the grades they needed to build the main line. This is the last Milwaukee Road train through Shonkin, Montana, is now long gone, but a few relics remain, including code line, elevator, and a semi-restored depot there on the right-hand side. This was part of Milwaukee Road's grain feeder lines in central Montana. You'll notice in this presentation, I photograph a lot of box cars, specifically Milwaukee ones. I've photographed several hundred of them throughout the US on different ranches and properties. And anytime that I see one, I always photograph it because you never know when it will disappear. This Milwaukee Road boxcar was used as a retaining wall in St. Mary's, Idaho. It was built in March of 1947. It's definitely seen a lot of miles. There's, I believe, 5 or 6 of them here, holding back the side of the hill from coming in on the rail yard there at St. Mary's River Railroad. This is where the Great Northern crossed over the Milwaukee Road, just north of Cushman, Montana. The Milwaukee Road's water tower foundations are in the foreground. What's kind of neat about this too is out of frame to the right-hand side, I believe it's the Musselshell River flows through here. And there were several old drawbars and couplers still in the river, been there for over 50 years. You can see on the left-hand side there, that's my beloved Miss Montana soaking up some sunlight. She was on the scent trail of something good in Substation 21. Substation 21 is located in Taunton, Washington. I think there's only 5 or 6 substations still standing of the original 21. On the right-hand side, this is just outside of Canova, Washington. These boxcars supposedly derailed on the last train eastward near Canova, Washington. The hospital train gathered many remaining equipment of the railroad and its assets as it headed east. When these cars derailed, I believe they said it required too much effort, so that's why they remain here today. Here's an additional railroad photo of those boxcars there. Once again, we have another boxcar. This was located in the Vendome Loops region on the east side of Pipestone Pass. Pipestone is just outside of Butte, Montana. It was the Milwaukee Road's main line over the Continental Divide. The current owner also has a Great Northern boxcar on the property as well. Both boxcars kind of have the accordion effect where they were involved in derailments, and that's why they remain there today. This was kind of cool. I grew up enjoying ranching and seeing things like that, and I've always I think it's cool that the horses now live in this boxcar. So this is Milwaukee Road Tender. It's been repurposed as a water basin for the town of Ingomar, Montana. The tender served the town's water source for over 30 years after the Milwaukee left town. One of the town's logos, Nick Finelli, had some old new stock decals that he reapplied to the tender. No longer serves as the water source. I believe they have actual piped in water now, but it's kind of neat that the railroad left that there. It's remnants of the main line near Anaconda, Montana. Just to the right there is Anaconda, kind of back in the mountains there. And Anaconda was specifically known for copper mining. So remember, this is the Milwaukee Road's branch line near Square Butte, Montana. It's currently owned by Central Montana Railroad and out of service. This is the Winifred, Montana depot. I noticed when I was here this past year, I stopped by in April. Someone had some pride still left in this area. The station sign actually had the dust swept off of it, and there were newer nails in the siding on the depot. You can see my dog right there in the shadows blending in with the dirt quite nicely. This is the Milwaukee Road branch line between Lewistown and Great Falls. Although it was a minor branch line, it was built to mainline standards with steel bridges and concrete line tunnels. This bridge is over Bell Creek. According to an article written in 1915, 10,000 tons of steel and 76,000 cubic yards of concrete were used on the 137.7 mile long branch line. The steel of this bridge was erected in just 15 days. And the management at the time said it would have been faster if there wasn't a tunnel on each end of the bridge. It's 198 feet to the creek below. I rode a horseback across this bridge, and that was kind of spooky, but it was very, very neat to see and experience. Here we have a telltale near Lacey Tunnel on a cold December evening. The rails are long gone, but the memories still remain. This photo, you have the Red Coulee Tunnel there on the left-hand side, and just out of frame to the right is the Red Coulee Trestle. It was another steel viaduct built to span one of the valleys. This is still part of the branch line between Lewistown and Great Falls. You can see those loadouts there on the right-hand side. Those were used for grain loadouts. Trucks would come down that road on the upper tier. There was like a spur there, a house track, and they would dump grain into typically box cars, and then they would use wood sides to block the doors as the grain got higher and higher till they were full. It's pretty incredible what still remains today. This is substation number 3 foundation at Francis, Montana. This is located on one of Ted Turner's ranches. You can see the old cattle pens to the right. This is near Eagle's Nest, which is a pretty popular name with the Milwaukee Road. Access is pretty hard to get, especially in this area. It's another Milwaukee Road boxcar at Griffin, North Dakota. Another photographer that I really enjoy seeing, Will Jordan. He did a fantastic image of this boxcar at night with the Milky Way above. Here we have the Sorrento Tunnel near Plummer, Idaho. This was once for sale in 2008, and it included about 50 acres of land plus the tunnel for $625,000. I've noticed as time has gone on, the railroad is constantly changing. And I think it was important when I took most of these pictures starting about 4 years ago that it was important to document it while I could, because as time goes on, things disappear. This tunnel, a year before, you were able to walk all the way through it. With a year later, after I visited a second time, there was so much mud on the inside from the top of the roof starting to cave in that it actually could touch the ceiling when you climbed over the pile of dirt in there. So time is of an essence when it comes to documenting these things. This was the 1,303 foot long Indian Creek Trestle. It is still in use by Central Montana Rail. What's incredible is this is a branch line. This is not even a main line, and it's still built to these standards. This is part of the Milwaukee Road's main line. This is the bridge over the Yellowstone River, west of Terry, Montana. Up in the buttes on the left-hand side, I found names. There's carvings up there in the sandstone. The carvings were the names of 3 of General Custer's men a couple days before they fought and died in the Battle of Little Bighorn. The climate out here preserves a lot of different things, and I thought that was a neat piece of history that's slowly fading away. Here you have tunnel number 34 on St. Paul Pass. Graffiti artist Deuce 7 left his Hiawatha tribute next to the portal there on the right-hand side. You can see just above the tunnel portal, the Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific, I believe is what the logo says up there. This was in the news recently. This bridge actually got a part of the bike trail, the Cascades to Palouse Trail. They finished this bridge. They put the decking on it and everything. And this was taken about 3 years ago before all of that happened. The sunlight's coming over the mountain range there, and this was in the evening. I was chasing sunlight west, trying to document as much as I could. And this is looking down the bridge over the Columbia River. Here we have a Milwaukee Road speeder shanty near Martinsdale, Montana. What was kind of neat about this this image here is on the right-hand side, you can see those little blue caps. And I believe those are old baby feed jars that the glass jar would screw into them. And it's kind of an old school way of keeping track of like nuts and bolts and things. And it was neat to see that that was still there. You can see the rails in the bottom of the floor. They're made of wood. That's where they would store motor cars for the night. Just to the left of this, there was an old outhouse. And if anybody is into like historical looking, at old buildings and things like that, you'll probably hear that some of the outhouses actually have things in the basin down below where people, when they go to use the restroom, something falls out of their pocket, goes into the pit down below, and you never know what you'll find. When I was looking at the outhouse, it had blown over and I saw the pit down below, and I happened to notice this shiny piece of metal coming out of the dirt down there, and it was all dry. It's been out of use for 40 years. Well, when I pulled it out, it was part of a Martinsdale, Montana station sign that was, I believe it was not a reproduction, but it was some sort of railroad signage used because it was M-A-R-T. And it was just a section of, it wasn't an original sign, it was hand painted, but it was kind of a neat thing to find. And sometimes you just never know what you'll come across. Here we have I assume it's a section crew scribe of some sort. It looks like LD Mack. He's probably the foreman in charge, telling to his gang 10 days left on the rotation. This was inside a tunnel just outside of Clinton, Montana. Took this about 4 years ago. What was kind of neat, I used a trainman's lantern to light this up, which was kind of a neat tidbit. Here you have rural North Dakota Milwaukee Depot barely hanging on. Miss Montana knows Dad has the camera out and strikes a pose while looking for a bunny amongst the tall grass. This was the interior of the Pine City Depot in Washington before the fire that destroyed most of the town. The folks that owned the depot were extremely friendly and offered me dinner that evening as we talked around the depot. The round light pattern was from my conductor's lantern. This was also done with shipping crate ink. A lot of times, workers of the railroad would use shipping crate ink to write on the different buildings, especially in old freight rooms. Here's the relocated Danvers, Montana depot. It's located on a ranch. That freight room also had some shipping ink markings on the inside. You can still see the Milwaukee orange barely hanging on there. This was a hat given to the shop owner here of the last eastbound crew out of Avery, Idaho. It's located in the general store there in Avery. On the bottom side of that hat are names from the last crew that went eastbound. I believe it was 22480 there, which was with the train number 201. It's a pretty neat piece of history that slowly is fading away even more. It's the last slide of my presentation here. This is the end of the main line, Miles City, Montana. This is looking east towards Miles City. In all, I think there was over 1,000 miles of main line abandoned. So there's still quite a bit out there. I've been able to photograph and document pretty much every major structure that I've been able to find. So this is the last part of my presentation. This is Boomer, a mixed series of photos from my travels and railroad career. The Catskill Railroad Archive has a great definition of boomer. Boomer, drifter who went from one railroad job to another, staying but a short time on each job or each road. This term dates back to the pioneer days when men followed boom camps. The opposite is home guard. Boomers should not be confused with tramps, although they occasionally become tramps. Boomers were railroad workers often in big demand because of their wide experience, sometimes blackballed because their tenure of stay was uncertain. The common practice was to follow the rushes, that is, to apply for seasonal jobs when and where they were most needed, when the movement of strawberry crops, watermelons, grain, etc. was making the railroads temporarily shorthanded. There are virtually no boomers in North America today. When the men are needed for seasonal jobs, they are called from the extra board. As a boomer, I can attest to most of that. I have worked for many railroads, mostly as a seasonal conductor. I've also worked as yardmaster, engineer, flagman, company photographer, etc. It is extremely helpful to be flexible in regards to work styles. As an employee of the railroads, I often do ride-alongs when not performing conductor duties to get the photos I desire. Oftentimes, I work for a period of time, then take several months off to travel, wander, and take photos. This series is a mix of both photos from my travels and railroad career. Pictured is an interior of a tunnel with a locomotive headlights in West Virginia. All right, I titled this picture "The Old Head." This is Jeffrey Stebbins in Antonio, Colorado. On the left, we have fellow boomer Stephanie Gentles. She worked for Watco at the time. On the right, this is Nevada Northern's Railways, their engine house there at Ely, Nevada. I was awarded a photography scholarship in February of 2022. I spent some time on the railroad in Park, Virginia. This is when they formed, going to fuel locomotives. This photo made it into Railfan and Railroad's center spread contest this past year. I was one of the runner-ups. This was looking over the shoulder of engineer Seth McBride en route to Relief, Ohio. We have another one, Jason Keithley, repeating back radio car counts as the conductors watching the show. Engineer Seth McBride. Seth and Jason washing some locomotives at the high yard. Fuel contractor, he was doing some mechanical work as well. They were doing an oil change on this Jeep 38-2. Here we have a photo over the B&O's Bridge over the Ohio River. Got off on the manway just out of frame, and they had them shoved back a little bit to the crew shoved back to be able to get this shot. Here we are loading sand up onto one of the locomotives. The sand came from Zanesville, Ohio. It's a special blend to use in our locomotives. On the left, we have Big Matt. He's using some frog weld to do some repairs on a frog there in the high yard. On the right-hand side, we have Cody Collins. He's a conductor. He's smoking a cigarette as we go through the rolling hills of Ohio. This was a pretty neat photo. This was looking back from the engineer's side. We had an engineer and conductor on this run. And you had what's called a fog bow. It's just above the dynamic braking grids there on the Jeep. If you look kind of up above on the right-hand side, all the way across the tree line, it's vaguely visible, but that's a rainbow caused by fog. There's 22 cars trailing behind, a mix of river rock from Alabama and coal from West Virginia, going to the Globe Metallurgical Plant in Relief, Ohio. They make additives for the steel making industry. This was kind of neat. I only got about 10 slides left, so I'll go through this pretty quick. This was kind of neat. This is Tex, King of Tramps. He was a tramp that rode the rails for about 50 years, starting in 1927-ish. The E on top is for eastbound. That's the direction he was riding. As I've traveled, I've had a keen eye and growing passion for historic railroad worker, hobo, and tramp graffiti. Not so much for the spray can on cards. That's not really my style. Oftentimes, workers would use chalk or a paint stick to mark the sides of freight cars. Most people think hobos and tramps are one and the same, but in reality, they are different. Hobos are seasonal workers that ride the rails looking for work. Tramps are often people that beg for money and ride the rails to get around. Hobos and tramps were much more common during the Great Depression. Notice the spelling of Tex, King of Tramps. Tex often wrote his name as Tex KT, but the T, between the T and the EX on Tex, you'll see there's a little dash there. Tex's ego is pretty big. He's marked hundreds of buildings throughout the West, all the way from Beaumont, Texas to California to Milwaukee, all the way to Washington State, Montana. But the T-EX stood for Tex Extraordinary King of Tramps. Kind of a neat piece of history. I believe this piece was marked in the 1960s. Here we have my beloved Miss Montana Red on the nose of an MRL locomotive. She's getting ready to do a roll by. It's an Intermountain power plant train set coming up towards Soldier Summit. So looking back on the Foster High bridges as the CP Manifest closes in on Ottumwa, Iowa. Here we have Stephanie Gentles on the left on her birthday night. This is the nose of an IC SD70 on the main line of Mid-America. Then on the right side, this is gone, as well as the some of the semaphores today in New Mexico. It's pretty neat. Got Amtrak Chicago Yard. I'm going to do one major slide here, and then I'm going to roll through the rest. I met Patsy by chance while antiquing in Colorado. I struck out about 6 or 7 times earlier that day, but sometimes you just get lucky. The shop owner down the block had pointed me to Patsy's store, which I walked in. I could feel in the air that I was going to find something special. I wandered through a narrow aisle and picked an Overland Rail brochure holder, Santa Fe bean dish, and a few other items. Patsy came out from behind the counter, and we talked about old railroad monikers, antiques, and folk art. As our conversation flowed, I casually asked Patsy if she had anything else she thought for a second. She dug around in the back of her store and pulled this out. Drawn on the back of a Pullman quiet sign in 1930, this piece was created by Charles Rothwell. He was one of the first African-American homesteaders, cowboys, Pullman porters, World War I veteran, and civil rights leaders in the Denver region. After I purchased this sign, she said her husband passed away about a month ago. And although this piece was leaving his collection, he was looking down on us smiling, knowing it was going to a good home. Kit Carson, Colorado, 2019. This is the Iowa Northern Railway crew change, a barking dog north of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Oftentimes, points on the railroad are named after geographic features or people. In this case, a dog that always barked that seemed to fit the bill. On this March night, we were treated to all types of weather, including a large lightning and windstorm, rain, snow, even brief tornado warnings. I worked as a boomer on the Iowa Northern in the winter of this year, and I will be going back to Iowa for another winter season in December. Here we have a Great Northern era cantilever signaling at over the Great Divide on top of Glacier National Park, Montana there. Once again, Miss Montana Red meets Great Northern Rocky on a ranch in Montana. She's very photogenic. Bison was just in the background on the last slide. That's where the headlight was coming up there on the bottom right. This was part of Patty's boxcar compound in Great Falls that is now scrapped. It was scrapped earlier this year. She had a large collection of boxcars from various roads, including Northern Pacific, Burlington Northern, Great Northern, and Frisco. At one time, the 30-plus boxcars were shop spaces at her outdoor flea market. You were able to rent a space every weekend. She also had 2 baggage RPO cars there as well. This is all gone now, unfortunately. Tana looks out her custom Tanaliner coach window. In all seriousness, this was an ex-Santa Fe boxcar near Roswell, New Mexico. This was a very rare Illinois Central boxcar on a ranch in Louisiana. These are, I think, the only ones that I know that exist on a ranch, at least. I don't think any of them belong in museums. Montana Rail Link boxcars. These were in Missoula, Montana. These are all now scrapped. They're gone. There was Solid Cold reefers, Western Fruit Express reefers here. These are all now condos in their places. We have a Great Northern's Rocky. This is at a chip mill in Idaho. This is one of their Great Northern's wood chip hopper cars. It's just now used for chip storage without wheels. Classic shot of MRL. It's the 401 leading. This is the gas local along the Flathead River on their 10th subdivision. So seen from ahead of helper locomotives, a mix of diesel exhaust and coal loads emerged from the west portal of Mullen Tunnel near Blossburg, Montana. You can see the silhouette of the coal hoppers there and the light coming in. All quiet under the stars of the old Northern Pacific Main Line at Tuscarora, Montana. Last but not least, we have a flashing red on a cold winter evening in Manly, Iowa. I wanted to thank you for joining me on the presentation. Feel free to ask questions and reach out. Thanks for